Well, when it comes to what's next for the world economy, our next guest says the next few days of meetings from the Fed, the Bank of England, and the ECB could signal a global shift in restrictive policy, saying it's only a matter of time before Chair Powell, quote, bows to reality and starts hinting at the timing of rate cuts. Joining us here at Post 9, Cantor Fitzgerald CEO Howard Lutnick. Welcome back, Howard.
Good to see you both.
So what reality do you think Chair Powell needs to bow to?
Well, I just think it's going to be steady Eddie. If you think about it, a lot of people talking about cuts. You have to remember how slow the Fed is. Remember how late they were to the party, right? So what do you think? They're going to be early to this party of cutting? Come on, really? Late in the beginning and early at the end? I don't think so. The Fed goes slower than people think. They're going to hold steady, and then they're going to hold steady, and then they're going to hold steady. I don't think you're going to see real cuts until the economy really needs it. And are we feeling it really needs it? S&Ps, come on, you guys talk about it all day, every day. Does it feel like we need cuts today?
It's over a year right now.
Doesn't feel that way, does it?
But you're in real estate and you're in the markets, so does it feel differently there?
So real estate, if you own equity in real estate, okay, you know the meaning of the word pain. You know it because let's say you own a building and that building needs to be refinanced, right? You borrowed the money 10 years ago. You got a great rate at those zero interest rates. So good, so good. What happens now? You have to refinance it.
Not so good.
Can't get the same proceeds, and then it's going to wipe out. I think it's going to wipe out $700 billion are going to be defaulted in the next 2.5 years.
Where do you get that number?
Okay, that comes from all the research everywhere. I mean, I don't know it offhand because thank goodness I don't know it offhand. My poor brain couldn't handle all these things. But $700 billion will default, okay? And those defaults, and that's where Newmark will have, strangely, a generational win, which is in 2025 when all these buildings start to default, someone needs to sell the buildings. And we're going to be selling the buildings. We just finished, and we're wrapping up the FDIC sale. Remember, Newmark liquidated the Signature Bank. $60 billion portfolio of loans. Took care of that, closing by the end of the year. Way to go. It's really good for the business. But what's going to happen is they're going to sell buildings. And then when they sell buildings at the new lower price, you can lease buildings at lower prices. So 2025, end of 24, you're going to see real estate services, and Newmark in particular, is going to come out hot and strong. Unbelievably exciting. So that's a place that's going to win.
That's pretty soon. You think this all takes place in the next 12 to 18 months?
Oh, yeah. Back end of 24, you're going to start seeing vast defaults. Vast defaults. And these banks on Basel III, they don't want to own it. Sell it, sell it, sell it. No more kick the can down the road. You can kick the can down the road when you get a little bit of defaults. When there's a wave coming at you, sell, sell, sell. So you're going to see banks and lenders selling.
Extend and pretend doesn't happen this time.
It happens in the first half of 24, and then all of a sudden you're going to start seeing sell, 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 huge amounts of sales, right? Defaults rising, banks getting rid of it. Banks didn't underwrite it badly, right? After 08, 09, they learned their lesson, so these are reasonably underwritten. The banks aren't going to lose money, they're just going to blow them out. And then what happens is new buyers get it at a much lower price. They can lease it at a much better price. And all of a sudden, the world sort of begins again. But a lot of real estate pain.
Coming.
A lot of real estate pain.
I mean, it sounds like the size of this. Do you think it could have a systemic impact on the economy? Is it something that the Fed should be worried about?
It's a cut for the Fed in a weird way, right? You got to realize, like, when all those banks went broke, right? That was a systemic cut, right? Because all that money pulled out of the banks. Right, all that lending pulled out, right? So that's like these are like weird things that happen.
Silicon Valley,
right? So what's going to happen is it's just going to keep the Fed steady as that works through it. There's sort of, there's too much talk of cuts, too much. Well, they're going to have 4 cuts next year. Really? For us to have 4 cuts means all day long you two talk about how bad the economy is. Right, think about it. Yeah. For the Fed to cut 4 times, how bad must it be?
There's a school of thought, Howard, that suggests that they want to preserve the soft landing before it turns into recession and bring rates down from what they are calling a restrictive level because inflation's under control. You don't buy that?
That's the imaginary world of make-believe. believe the Fed that you and I know, that we talk about all the time, they're now getting ahead of it, planning, setting up the slow, easy landing? Really, what? No, listen, I go to sleep every night. I dream about that kind of stuff. But then when I wake up, okay, when I wake up, that's just not happening, okay? That is not happening. The Fed will only cut when it needs, when we need it. And what's happened is young people, okay, people 40 and under have never seen an interest rate in their whole lives. So they say, oh my God, it's 5.25. If you're as old as me, 62, right? You remember the 20 years before where 5% was like, it was pretty nice. My first job, right?
Rates were first mortgage.
They were like 17% cutting down.
Yes.
So what's happening is this world at 5.25 is fine. We're going to stay here for quite a long time, which is pretty steady and which is pretty good. So whereas fixed income is going to do really well, all the banks are going to do really well. Right? BGC, our wholesale financial service company, on fire, said revenues up 10%, expecting revenues to be up 10% next year, right? And continuing from this year, just fire. Stocks up, 50% so far this year. Going to keep going up, right? So banks are going to do well. What's going to do really well? Tech. Tech is going to do really, really well, right? Steady rates. Tech didn't do well when rates were going up, and you guys were talking about it every day. I watched you guys talk about it every day, calling it early, right? Now that rates are steady, they're rocking again.
Right.
So you got to like tech.
What about small caps? U.S. equities at large?
U.S. equities continue to, creep higher, right? 20% this year.
Yep.
Right? Remember the beginning of the year? We were not talking 20% up this year. 20% up this year. The model feels good, doesn't it? Doesn't feel bad here. You know, when you want to talk about rate cuts...
But it's dependent on cuts, which you don't think are happening.
They're not. It's not dependent on cuts. Yeah. Today's is not dependent on cuts, okay? The economy feels okay. Everything feels okay. Tech is doing really, really well, right? There's going to be a real estate reckoning, right? We talk about home mortgages. Why are people not selling their houses and home equity is holding up? Because you can't sell, right? I have a 4.5% mortgage. Right? I'm not selling my house. I'm just not selling. Because if I replace it when I buy a new house, 7.5, get lost.
Yeah.
So you know what? Remodel. Little remodeling of the house. So these things are working.
All right, so tech, fixed income, these are where you see opportunities.
Banks are going to do well.
Cryptos?
Okay, so I am a fan of crypto.
I did not know
But let's be very specific. Bitcoin, just Bitcoin. Right? These other coins, they're not a thing. All right? They're just not a thing. They're like kind of make-believe, these other things. Maybe Ethereum is okay, but Bitcoin, so every 4 years, Bitcoin doubles the price of how much work you have to do to get a coin. And if you go look at the history of Bitcoin, every time the doubling happens, it does well. So that, and combined with the concept of an ETF in America, right? Now, Bitcoin isn't really for Americans. You know that. It's just a speculative thing. It's kind of, I call it Tesla stock. It's kind of like Tesla stock, right? It's just something to trade. It's not, like, why is Tesla Tesla? The answer is because everybody buys it and it goes up. I mean, it's not like the fundamentals of Tesla or the
Why do you like that? Why, if it's just a speculative trade? Bitcoin or Tesla?
Because I think the halving and the way the world works these days, there's a lot of people who are worried about the fact that we run $2 trillion deficits, right? And there's a lot of the world that really wants to buy things. So they want to buy stable coins, right? And I'm a big fan of the stable coin called Tether.
Because you do business for them.
Well, I hold their treasuries, right? So I keep their treasuries, and they have a lot of treasuries. They're over $90 billion now. So I'm a big fan of Tethers. I think they're an excellent, interesting way that if you go to Argentina, right now, right, you have the new president of Argentina. Remember, he said he was going to use the dollar to run the country. The only problem with that is you need some. You need some of your own dollars to run your country in dollars. Like for us, it's pretty easy. We print them. It's easy for us. We go to the printing press, we have some dollars. They don't have them. So the idea of them doing it in dollars was a really fun thing to say to get elected, but you can't really do it unless you have reserves. And they don't have reserves, so they can't do that.
It's interesting that you're saying this. Last week, Jamie Dimon said that if he were in the government, he would ban Bitcoin.
Well, and not to mention what Munger said about it overall.
Well, okay, once upon a time, right, Charlie Munger had a view right? And that's a reasonable view, which says it has no purpose, okay? It has no fundamental purpose. But things that trade up and down sometimes have a purpose, right? Just think of this. If you're a Russian oligarch, all right, and you were trying to get out of Russia and you were scared to death of Putin and you wanted to get out, what did you do? You bought the world's biggest yacht. Why? Because you figured if I got to get out of Russia and I don't live in a country, I'll live on a country that's a boat, right? The boat's so big. I live on this boat. And guess what? What did the U.S. do? We just took them. Now, what is the only asset that these people could have held where no one could take it? You know what the answer is? Bitcoin.
Great. It's used for illicit.
It's not illicit.
Criminal activity.
No, but expatriate your assets.
To go around sanctions.
Well, I think Bitcoin is that. Like, Bitcoin is uncontrollable. There's no one you can call. See, Tether, if you have Tether, right, and Justice Department calls Tether, they freeze it because there's someone to call. There's no one to call on Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is a weird thing, but it's only Bitcoin is a weird thing. You know, in Ethereum, you can call Joe Lubin. Like, you can call a guy and say, hey, Joe.
Howard, you really brought it today.
Wow.
Thank you for
They let us go long, too.
Yeah, appreciate it. You had a lot.
Feels so short. Whenever I'm with you guys, it just feels really short.
You know what? Always leave them wanting more. Howard Lutnick, thank you very much. Kenner Fitzgerald to you.